Picture a world where you could pay for an entire year of college by working a summer job at a gas station. No loans, no debt, no second mortgage on your parents' house. That was America before the 1990s. And what happened next changed everything for generations to come. In 1979, a semester at a state university cost about $800. That same semester today, over $6,000 at the same school. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. It wasn't a slow climb. Something specific happened that broke the system forever. Back in the 70s and 80s, college was seen as a public good, something society invested in because educated citizens benefited everyone. State governments poured money into universities. Tuition covered maybe 20% of the actual cost. Taxpayers picked up the rest without complaint. A kid from a working-class family could realistically attend college without destroying their financial future. Nobody thought twice about it. You worked part-time, maybe took a small loan, and you graduated with a degree and a future. The American dream actually worked that way. Here's where it gets interesting. In the early 1980s, something shifted in how Americans thought about education. College started being seen less as a public investment and more as a private benefit. If you're getting the degree, the thinking went, why should everyone else pay for it? Ronald Reagan was governor of California when he first proposed that students should pay more of their education costs. He actually said that taxpayers shouldn't subsidize intellectual curiosity. That idea spread like wildfire across the country. The philosophy took root in state legislatures everywhere. By 1985, states started quietly pulling back their funding. Not all at once, just a little each year. Universities had to make up the difference somewhere. Guess where they turned? Your tuition bill. But students and families didn't panic yet because the increases seemed manageable at first. Then came the recession of the early 90s. State budgets got hammered. Education was one of the first places legislators looked to cut because it wasn't a legally protected expense like Medicaid. Universities lost 20, 30, sometimes 40% of their state funding almost overnight. Colleges faced an impossible choice: cut programs and faculty or raise tuition dramatically. They chose tuition increases. In 1992 and 1993, prices jumped 15 to 20% at some schools. Students protested, but the money had to come from somewhere. The era of affordable college died right there. But here's the cruel twist. Nobody saw coming. As college got more expensive, it also became more necessary. The economy was transforming. Factory jobs that paid middle-class wages were disappearing. Service jobs were taking over. You needed that degree now more than ever before. So demand for college exploded right as states were cutting funding. Basic economics took over. More people competing for the same spots, less government money to support it. Universities realized they could charge almost anything, and students would find a way to pay because they had no choice. Enter the student loan industry. In the 70s, student loans were modest, manageable things. By the mid-90s, they became a massive business. Banks realized this was a goldmine. Students couldn't declare bankruptcy on educational debt. It was the safest investment a bank could make. The federal government made it easier to borrow larger amounts. They thought they were helping students afford college. Instead, they created a system where universities could keep raising prices because loan money would always be available. It became a vicious cycle that fed itself. Something else happened that made everything worse. Universities started competing with each other in ways that had nothing to do with education. Luxury dorms, climbing walls, lazy rivers, gourmet dining halls. They were selling a lifestyle experience, not just classes. All of that cost money. The administrative bloat exploded too. In 1975, universities had one administrator for every 2 faculty members. By 1995, there were more administrators than professors at many schools. Every new assistant dean, every new diversity coordinator, every new marketing team added to your tuition bill. Parents who graduated college in the 70s were completely blindsided. They remembered paying their own way through school. They couldn't understand why their kids needed $40,000 in loans. The generation gap in understanding college costs created family tension that still exists today. Meanwhile, wages for young people were stagnant. In 1979, a minimum wage job gave you about $400 a month. By 1995, that same job adjusted for inflation gave you roughly the same. But college costs had tripled. Working your way through school became mathematically impossible. State universities that were once the affordable option started acting like private schools. They recruited out-of-state students who paid triple the tuition. They built fancy facilities to attract wealthier families. The mission of serving local kids got lost in the pursuit of revenue and rankings. Community colleges tried to fill the gap, offering cheaper alternatives. But even they started getting expensive. A two-year degree that cost maybe $500 total in 1980 was pushing $5,000 by the late 90s. The ladder up was getting kicked away. Financial aid formulas changed in ways that hurt middle-class families. Most, too wealthy for grants, not wealthy enough to pay cash. These families got squeezed the hardest. Their kids took on the biggest loan burdens, while rich kids paid cash and poor kids got aid. The psychological impact was profound. Students in the 70s and 80s went to college to explore, to find themselves, to learn. Students in the 90s went with a calculator in hand, constantly worried about return on investment. Education became transactional instead of transformational. Here's something that really shows how dramatic the change was. In 1980, you could pay for a year at the University of Michigan with about 700 hours of minimum wage work. By 1995, that same year required over 2,000 hours. One summer versus working full-time year-round. The debt burden fundamentally altered life choices for an entire generation. Graduates put off buying homes, starting families, taking career risks. They had loan payments the size of a car note hanging over them for decades. The ripple effects touched every corner of the economy. Some states tried to fight back. Georgia created the HOPE scholarship, promising free tuition to students who maintained good grades. Other states watched to see if it worked. But most never copied it because the political will to fund education had evaporated completely. Private colleges saw what was happening and realized they could charge whatever they wanted. $50,000 a year? Why not? Families would borrow it. The sticker price became almost meaningless because everyone was paying with loans anyway. Real price awareness disappeared from the market. By the late 90s, the transformation was complete. College had gone from a right that society invested in to a commodity you purchased with debt. The class divide widened. Rich kids graduated debt-free, while working-class kids started adult life $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in the hole. What's stunning is how quickly it happened. One generation graduated with maybe $5,000 in loans. The next graduated with $50,000. Parents and students both got caught flat-footed. The old advice about working hard and paying your way simply stopped being possible. The student loan crisis that dominates headlines today has its roots in those decisions made in the 80s and 90s. The idea that students should bear most of the cost, the withdrawal of state funding, the explosion of easy loan money. Those dominoes fell 30 years ago. International students started flooding American universities because even at inflated prices, degrees were still valuable. Schools loved this because foreign students paid full freight with no financial aid. Enrollment management became about maximizing revenue, not maximizing access for local students. Some fields got hit worse than others. Want to be a teacher? That requires a degree, but teaching salaries barely budged while college costs exploded. Graduates faced 30 years of loan payments on a $40,000 salary. The math just stopped making sense. Credit card companies started targeting college students aggressively in the 90s. Kids already drowning in student loans were offered plastic with high interest rates. Some graduates left school with educational debt plus credit card debt plus car loans. The burden became crushing before careers even started. There were families who saw what was coming and made hard choices. Some parents took second jobs for years to save. Some kids chose cheaper schools or skipped college entirely. But society still pushed the message that you needed that degree. Walking away felt like giving up on the future. The for-profit college industry exploded during this time, promising education to anyone who could get a loan approved. They advertised on late-night television and targeted working adults. Many delivered questionable education while loading students with debt. It was predatory, but it was legal. Traditional universities started offering more online programs and satellite campuses. It was partly about access, but mostly about revenue. Every new student meant more tuition money. The business model of higher education completely changed. Education became a product to sell rather than a public service. Young people started questioning whether college was worth it. That question would have been unthinkable in 1975. Everyone knew college was the ticket to the middle class. By 1995, that certainty was cracking. Some kids looked at the math and walked away. The textbook industry saw an opportunity too. Prices for textbooks exploded. A book that cost $20 in 1985 cost $120 10 years later. Publishers released new editions constantly, so used books became worthless. Students were getting squeezed from every direction. Room and board costs climbed almost as fast as tuition. Universities built nicer dorms and charged accordingly. What used to be simple housing became a revenue center. Students paid hotel prices to live in rooms that were still basically dorm rooms. Everything became a profit opportunity. Some students worked 2 or 3 jobs while attending classes full-time. They were exhausted, stressed, barely keeping up. The college experience their parents remembered, with time for clubs and socializing and discovery, became a luxury only wealthier students could afford. Everyone else just survived. The mental health crisis on campuses started building in the 90s. Students were under financial pressure their predecessors never faced. Anxiety and depression rates climbed. Counseling centers couldn't keep up with demand. The stress of debt was literally making students sick before they even graduated. Politicians talked about fixing the problem, but rarely did anything meaningful. Both parties accepted money from the loan industry. Reform was always just around the corner, never quite arriving. Students kept borrowing, schools kept raising prices, and the cycle continued without serious intervention. Some graduates fled the country to escape their loans. They took jobs teaching English in Asia, or found work in Europe. It sounds extreme, but when you're facing decades of payments with no way out, leaving the country starts looking rational. The debt had become inescapable. The promise that college would pay for itself through higher earnings was still technically true on average, but averages hide a lot. Some graduates thrived. Many others struggled with degrees that didn't lead to good jobs while still owing tens of thousands. The risk had shifted entirely onto students. Community support systems that existed in earlier decades disappeared. Churches and civic organizations used to help local kids with college costs. That kind of support faded as college became unaffordably expensive. Communities couldn't keep up with price increases that outpaced inflation by multiples. The psychological weight of debt changed how students approached education. Instead of taking interesting classes, they laser-focused on career prep. Philosophy and art history enrollments dropped. Business and engineering climbed. College stopped being about becoming educated and started being about getting a job. Some families made the calculation that debt was worth it for elite schools, but not for state schools. That thinking would have been backwards in 1980 when state schools were incredibly cheap. By the late 90s, the premium for private schools seemed justified because everything was expensive anyway. The ripple effects touched the housing market, the job market, consumer spending, everything. An entire generation entered adulthood, financially hobbled. They couldn't buy homes, couldn't save for retirement, couldn't start businesses. The economic dynamism that education was supposed to create got strangled by debt. Looking back, the warning signs were obvious. When state funding started dropping, when loans became easy, when prices started climbing faster than inflation. But nobody wanted to believe college could become unaffordable in America. By the time people realized what was happening, the system had already transformed. Some students from the 90s are still paying off their loans today. 30 years later, they're in their 50s, trying to save for retirement while making loan payments. Their kids are now facing even worse costs. The generational wealth building that education promised never materialized for millions. There are countries that never went down this path. Germany made college free. Nordic countries kept it affordable. They saw education as infrastructure, like roads or police. America took a different route, treating it like a private purchase. The consequences of that choice are still unfolding. The world where college was affordable existed within living memory. People who graduated in the 70s and 80s experienced it. They worked summer jobs, paid tuition, graduated debt-free. That world wasn't ancient history. It was one policy shift, one funding cut, one philosophical change away. What died in the 90s wasn't just affordable college. It was the idea that society had a collective responsibility to educate its young people. The latter got pulled up. Opportunity became something you purchased rather than something you earned. And that change reshaped America in ways we're still reckoning with today.